it is trauma related. And as a mom with teenage sons, and I've adopted a son who is now a teenager, and he hangs in this area. It is troublesome because these kids, they're teenagers. And unfortunately, they have come from homes that are not stable. But when the stabilization is not there, the one thing that's consistent is the killing, the violence. That's consistency. And kids tend to gravitate what's consistent, what's the norm. And unfortunately, gun violence this year and last year has become the norm for our teenage kids. Now, what can we do about it? Bringing up my kids, I was in control. The city was not in control. When my children were acting out, I was the disciplinary in the home. The city could not come in and tell me, you can't put that child on punishment, or a spanking was not allowed. Whatever the punishment was, he got punished accordingly. Now, we all know the difference between disciplining and abuse. There has been a line drawn with the parent in the schools because the kids aren't going to school. They're hanging out on the streets, creating more violence, more problems, more trouble. But when we, as a parent, when you lose your rights in the school, the kids say, hey, I'm not even going to go to school. We have no recourse there as parents.
I think we do have recourse. I think this was a systematic process. The government, there's always been racism in politics in the Black family. Yeah. Black families are money makers for a system of government. We know how we look back on the history of foster care and history of orphanage. I'm an orphan myself.
As am I.
And I grew up in foster care system. And I've worked in the foster care system years ago. I'm not working in it anymore. And it's a convoluted system. In one intent, it wants to do so-called good. I call it the white good, the feelings of guilt. But in the second sense, welfare and the removal of the male African-American, the breakdown of the Black family after the civil rights movement, because Black families weren't facing any of that during the Renaissance period in the early 20th century, all the way up into the 60s. It wasn't until the 70s with women's liberation movement and Black women adopting this concept of liberation when they weren't the ones being oppressed by their husbands. White women were. They were the ones who wanted to get out and do something. And you know, the women's suffrage movement and all of that. But in any case, it's systematic. It's a way to make money. It's just like criminalizing targeting Black people on the street for crimes. It's a way for the system to make money. How do you get this system to do that with families? You introduce it into the elementary schools with what is abuse and what not is. This should have never, ever happened because it was targeted for a specific family. That's why it's so disproportionate. So when you understand how systems work, it's all about destroy the schools, destroy education, and you will destroy a family and a community. And part of parcel what's happened in Germantown is they've taken the schools away. They've taken the libraries away. They've taken the, forced this charter school business on us. And we got mental health places here, but we don't have mental health places for the real situations that families face. When you have Black men not in the home, as much as they would want you to believe that, there are a lot of Black men caring for their kids, single Black men caring for their children.
In Germantown, there are more drug rehabs. There are more
mental health
mental health facilities, but there are no community centers. There's no PALS here in Germantown. There's no community organization where kids can go, get on a computer, take up a trade or learn. It's just focused on what they perceive to be mental health. Because that's a way of making money. They're not making money when they're opening up community centers. They're spending money. So they don't want to spend that money in our community. So as community members, what can we do? The census is a great idea because that puts money into the community. However, We have a society here that is distrustful of the census, the president, the government in the whole of itself. So therefore, we can't even fight for ourselves because the weapons that we're giving, the tools that we give them to weaponize themselves with, is a false narrative to them.
Well, I disagree. I disagree on the fact that we can't fight for ourselves. I believe that we have a resiliency within our culture.
It is more difficult to fight for ourselves. I'll rephrase it that way. Because you can't fight. Listen, we're here, Lenore and I, and we're encouraging people to sign up for the census. We're explaining how important that census is. We have gotten so much feedback like, oh, I'm not giving them my information. I can't do that. They're just going to track me. I don't believe that. So no matter how reassuring we are, and we're coming with facts, we're still getting pushback. Like, no, I don't trust them. They're going to use this for that. They're not. What money? Our kids didn't even get computers. We got this. We didn't get this and that.
Well, that's for a reason. That's for a legitimate reason. There are no mistakes and there are no accidents from my perspective.
But even when you legitimize it, it is legitimized. But however, we still need a solution.
Well, let's look at it. Let's look at that for a moment. There is a solution. There's no victimization here.
Okay.
You know, a lot of this stuff, a lot of blacks have caused on themselves by being sleepy and passive. We have to now become more interactive. We have to now have you understood anything about Marcus Garvey?
So I have to disagree with you when you say that there is no the victimization, because listen, they don't know. They don't have the information. So therefore, not all of us are passive and laid back. They just don't have the information. The information is not coming to the community. Because where we have seen pushback, we've also seen people that said, oh yes, please help me. We need to help filling out these forms. We understand. So let's be careful when we and say that, use the terminology laid back and passive. No, we're uninformed because the information is not here at the community.
Information is there. We live in an information age.
And I would say, and then I will come back and say this, that you can ask a question, but listen, not everyone is as fortunate as myself to have 3 cell phones, Wi-Fi at home, and the knowledge to use it. Because you can get information and then the education level. Are you understanding the information that is being given to you? Not a lot. So let's give the community a break and just agree that there needs to be, we need to put more effort into explaining and getting out there and not giving up and giving them information. Yes, you're absolutely right. We are in the information stage. However, when you're looking at the economically underprivileged community, they cannot access that information effectively the way you and I, Lenore and Steve and Carol can. So I think that's where, and then when you look at the neighborhood, we watch people walk by every day, and not in judgment, but we see that we need to help this person inability to understand, comprehend. And like you said, then some of them, you said it yourself, struggle with mental health. Mm-hmm. So that is a variable that we should not overlook as well.
See, I want you to see it from a systems perspective. There are things that's going to happen that have happened in our community. Partly, there's 2 sides to every coin. Partly because of us and partly because of the system. How do we move forward is we have to understand what the cause of the problem was on our part and the system's part, because it goes together. We interact with systems every day, educational systems, financial systems, family systems, community systems, political systems. Now, there are some people out here who are very resilient, and that there are going to be some people who don't have information, and some people that we might not be able to give them information. And there are going to be people who have information. The people who have information need to work at a strategy for disseminating that information in a strategic kind of broad way so that more people can be drawn into that system of understanding and getting access to information. how we can move forward is to recognize what we did wrong in the past. There were things that I worked at the Philadelphia School District as an ombudsman. I tried to draw parents in on what type of books, activities, and services that that school gets. It was a struggle for me to do that because there were parents who were misinformed and uneducated about things and had their own misconceptions and biases and prejudices about the school system. It was a struggle for them and it was a new experience for me. But it was a challenge, and it's just the same, to get a few more parents involved in that process. Getting those parents in the projects to participate in becoming a proactive effort in the school. They want to see change. Don't come to me and fucking complain. Come to the parent teachers conference and I'll show you what you can do to be proactive so that this school won't turn into a charter school. If you dropped out of high school, you don't read, I come to your place in the projects and I see you don't have no books in your home and no magazines. What the fuck? That's your fucking fault. It's not my fault. So now I got to show you, you know, in a nice way. I have to use psychology in such a way that draws you in and drops your defenses and brings you on board to be able to listen to me. Because some of them parents didn't even want to listen because it was already high when I came to their damn door. So these are things, the intricate things that you have to think about. Making change is facing change is difficult, but making change is even more difficult because you have to get people out of a certain paradigm of thinking. We could use the newspaper. I know your frustration about trying to get people to understand the census is important, but that's the challenge in any effort across the system to try to get people who are disenfranchised and have a distaste or a bad taste in their mouth about a system. How do you get those people to stop going against their best interests when they have doubled down on their cognitive dissonance?
I'm going to use the word compassion. We need more compassion for circumstances. Everything you said, I totally agree with. However, I too grew up in foster care. Slayton Farms Youth Study Center. I was beat the hell out of as a kid growing up. But as an adult, I have the best relationship with my mother. So she didn't get it right then, but she got it right. And my patience and my love and compassion is what helped, is why we have the relationship we have. And if I was to that same passion and compassion that I have for my mom's relationship, it's the same that I have within my community and the people in it. Because some people just need you to stroke them on the shoulder. They need you to come back another day and
say, what is your strategy?
How about we do it this way?
And what are you saying?
Gotta care.
And what are you saying in reference to providing empathy in a broader scope of a strategy? I understand your personal experience, but when we talk about empathy, when we talk about validation, because that's what I spoke about earlier. How did I get these parents to be involved? You have to validate people. You have to validate their experience. If someone comes to you and says, I'm not signing that, I don't believe in it, say, well, you know what?
I totally understand.
Listen, this is a mental health strategy that I use every day with parents who reject mental health services for their children. I don't need no help. You know, I do all this and do all that, and nobody helping me. First thing I always do is I validate their experience. Yeah. I say, you know what? Hold on, hear what I'm saying. I validate their experience. I say, you know what? It's amazing the work that you do and what you've done to provide for your children. All I want to do is come in and show you some ways to improve upon that, to make that better. That drops the parents' defenses.
Absolutely.
So what I'm saying, how do you use that in a broader way to save Germantown? How do you lay that on the table as an objective and a strategy to go forward? What framework constitutes a good family? It's support. It's having support.
Discipline.
The families don't have supports, external supports and internal supports. Internal supports are usually fulfilled by core values, value systems. When we lose value systems within a family and structure, then we have a problem in our community. That core value system is not respected in the community, and the child has no understanding about how to respect other people's core value systems, and that parent doesn't. I'm not going to say there's a strategy for recultivating that, but grandmothers have tried to maintain that, but they're dying off, and you have this generation of people who don't, their values, their core values are not the same. If we can find a medium, a platform that helps build core African American values that have sustained African American communities in the past, and bring that forward today. One of those core values, I think the young lady here. What's your name, ma'am?
Sheena.
No, not you. The young lady next, the elder woman next to you.
Lenore.
Yes, I think she has more to know about those core values that sustained family than I would. I'm 56. I grew up in a foster home. I remember some values, but can you tell us about some of the core African American values that used to be in the home?
Yes, family. My mother and father were separated and divorced, but we lived with my grandparents. We learned what they had to tell us. We went to church, like it or not, we went to church. Our friends, they knew who our friends were. We sat down, we ate together. We didn't come in, change our clothes, and go back in the street. No homework done. My mother worked. When she came home, our homework better be on the table. If we were not at the table, the homework needed to be there, or we got in trouble. We got our behinds beat. My mother, like I've noticed now, parents go back and forth. The children are pawns. My mother only had to call my father when we didn't want to listen. He was right there. It wasn't, you don't have to listen to your mother. You do what your mother tells you to do. It was just so much going on. I can't explain it all.
Well, I'm glad you said that. You made one key point that causes what we see as an old family or traditional old family core value compared to today's core value. You said your family sent you to church.
Yeah.
Now let's look at today's society, young society, the millennials. They're not so much churchgoers. They're more about the ancestors, universal divine intervention through our ancestors. They don't believe in the model of the church anymore. They look at the church from a negative standpoint of them not putting back into the community, taking only out of the community. These mega churches, they've drawn away from that. If that was such a core factor in building a stronger community, how do we go at that to bring that kind of core value back? I'm talking about the value of what the church the value of what the church still was community, to be able to get together and know your neighbors. That was the thing that we took back to the community, and the church was now the community. It wasn't the church building. The church was a place where people could come and know each other, have cake sales and things like that, and talk about their kids going to college and things like that. We don't have that kind of thing. And then when that was moved, at least you could do it at the community center, but we don't have the community center. So how do we find a way to do that with the place of media replacing it, social media replacing that? Because we may not be able to bring the church thing back anymore unless you begin to start having pastors who preach ancestral, historical history to younger people who want to know their history and how it's relative to them and how their ancestors believe that carries them forward in the future.
You know what, speaking about mental illness, I have a grandson who will be 27 Monday. About 3 months ago, he just tapped out. This was all too much for him. COVID, this, that, and the other. He had no hope. But I thank God he had a good father. And his father went and found him, took him to the hospital. He stayed there a week. He got it together. He came home. Then my youngest daughter, who he has always been her buddy, she took him. He's now with her. He's doing much better, looking into things to interest him and everything. And I'm right there fussing at him. And my daughter said, Mom, sometimes he thinks you don't like him. I said, that's okay, I don't have to like it. So one day when him and I were out, I said, baby boy, I'm understanding that you think I don't like you. And he said, Mama, you fuss at me. I said, that's because I love you. I said, have I ever told you anything wrong? No. I said, well, let me tell you something. I don't have to like none of y'all, but I love all of you. And I told him, I said, you have to use love. Let love lift you up.
I'm glad you shared it, because yesterday a parent, a senior woman walked into my center yesterday, and she shared some stuff with me in reference to almost what you're saying about her grandson. And these are the same kids who could easily find access to a weapon and cause a crime, or go like the boy did on Germantown Avenue. Yeah. And I think this is important for us to note that we got to talk to our young people. They don't feel like they're being talked to. And older people seem to have this fear of them, fear of talking to young people. But like we were saying earlier, when you validate people's feelings and validate people's experiences, I found this to work 99% of the time against my worst enemy. When you validate the reason why they feel the way they feel, when you say, I understand why you feel that way, and you have every right to feel that way, that drops people's defenses across the board. If you want to do a broad, sweeping gathering of people, validate them. Validate them and they'll come your way. Validate who they are. Give them some, and make them feel important. Make them feel heard. Make them feel valued. When you do that to people across the board, people begin to listen to you. People begin to say, you know what, I can drop my walls, I can drop my fears for a moment. And then you can feed them. You can feed them information that can help them to grow, but then they're willing to listen. Reach out without fear. Reach with validation in hand. Reach with the sword of validation. I'm coming to validate you. I'm saying hi to you, how are you doing, and listening to you and waiting for you to say something that I can validate. And simple words that validate you can use across the board with anybody, white, black, racist. You say, you know what, I understand what you mean. I probably would do the same thing if I was in your position. You say those few short words. That shows empathy, validation, and it gives them a sense of dropping their defenses. You do that to a racist, they'll always talk to you. They'll always find out that you'll be on a common page with them. Because this is all about fear and all of wanting to be heard. That's all it's about.